Recently, I challenged myself to beat 9 Metroidvania games in a 12-day window. The 9 games would be Alwa's Awakening, Alwa's Legacy, Animal Well, Exophobia, Guacamelee, Ori and the Will of the Wisp, Pseudoregalia, The Messenger, and Yoku's Island Express. These games were a mix of games in my Steam library or games I've been meaning to play thanks to good word of mouth. But I didn't want to rush through any games and miss out on any good experiences because of the 12-day window. So my Twitch chat and I decided for that each game in this little challenge, we'd have to get at least 70% of the achievements on Steam before going into the next one, just so we could fully experience it and not feel rushed. So, let's get to Metroidvanias. The first game I picked up was Animal Well. It was released on May 9th, 2024, and I was excited for this game and a little scared. Excited because it was so highly acclaimed and praised by so many. I was told that I would love it or I should play it, but I was also scared because people said it could be a long game and it can be very puzzling. I'm not the best at puzzles in video games, but I was still more excited to tackle this game. The main focus for normal completion is gathering 4 flames scattered throughout the entire map, and I'll say this game has nothing to be scared of. The combat was non-existent technically. You would run into some bosses, but it was more so using the environment around you to outsmart them. You're just a little blob, find some nice items to help improve movement, and solve puzzles with the bubble wand, yo-yo, and a slinky. All the puzzles are so expertly crafted and fun to solve with the tools at your disposal. I really did enjoy my time with this game more than I expected. The main game could take about 6 hours to beat if you're rushing through it, but I was able to beat it in just under 12 hours and was able to get 70% of the achievements exactly. But the game having 64 secret eggs to find makes this one of the most enjoyable achievement hunting games out there. It's relaxing, puzzling, and not too hard. A great time overall. After Animal Well, we decided to spin a wheel to see which game we would play next because that just makes it a little more exciting. And the wheel landed on what I assumed to be the longest game on this list, and it was Ori and the Will of the Wisp. It was released March 11th, 2020, and I did play the first Ori game, Ori and the Blind Forest, about 4 years ago. So I was excited for this one. I will say this game does have a handful of awful achievements for this challenge with not dying or beating the game in a certain amount of time. Things I know I will not accomplish, so I decided to play this on hard mode and was going to collect everything. The story of Ori is incredibly sad. It carries on from the first game with the owl Ku getting separated from Ori and getting lost in the forest. You need to travel to the Wellspring Glades to clean Niwen's water, which makes the game more accessible as you're finally able to swim. The story goes on, and Ku actually ends up dying when you do get reunited initially after the first quarter of the game, which then opens up the rest of the game to gather 3 more Will o' the Wisp and explore the entire world. I was blown away by this game. I remember liking the first game, but nothing too memorable. But this game was exceptional. The pacing, the ease of quest, all the abilities that you can have with your basic abilities you equip, and the shards that give you passive buffs, and then of course the fun collectibles with life and energy cells, Golek ore to rebuild the Wellspring Glade, which is home to all the Mokis, who are cute little animals in the world, and fun little extra activities like racing spirits to gain extra currency. Everything about this game I loved. It took me almost 20 hours to beat, and at the end of it, I had all the ores, all the cells, all the races done, all the items collected, and I was so satisfied with how this game ended, even if it was a little sad. I got lost a few times as you would in a Metroidvania game, but never really felt frustrated. The combat wasn't the greatest at times, but it was acceptable and never bore me. Some bosses were tough to beat as they were tanky in hard mode, but the final boss was incredible. This honestly might be one of the best Metroidvania games I've ever played, maybe even one of the best games I've ever played. Ori and the Will of the Wisp was near perfection for me. Our wheel landed on Pseudoregalia next, and I had some high hopes for this game because it has overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam and almost 10,000 reviews total while releasing on July 23rd, 2023. So this game has gained some traction and is loved. And after playing it and beating it in about 6 hours or so, I can see why people do love it. I really do. But I don't think it deserves that overwhelmingly positive review score that it has on Steam, and let me tell you why. First, your main objective of the game is to find 5 keys scattered across the world. You find a lot of upgrades to improve your movement with slide dashes, wall kicks, and ability to jump off objects, and more. That's where the game shines the most by a marathon. The movement in this game is stellar, which was a little surprising because of the graphics. You wouldn't expect a game inspired by classic N64 and PS1 games to move so fluidly, but sadly, that's where my praise ends for Pseudoregalia. But one of the more important things for me in a Metroid Metroidvania is combat and progression. The combat was lackluster as the enemies were kinda boring and the game only had 2 boss fights total. The final boss is good, but that doesn't make up for the lack of bosses and combat throughout the entire game. More importantly, the progression was rough and vague. I don't mind a game being vague with what you need to do. It allows you to explore the world a bit and see your limits, but it was too open to begin with. I found myself getting lost so easily and running into areas I shouldn't have been, but thought I'd be able to progress since my jumps were so close to being complete. It's a minor problem really, just need to add some barriers to certain locations to easily indicate to the player that they should come back here later. That's really the biggest thing with Pseudoregalia. I like the movement and abilities, but it has so many smaller negatives that hindered the experience. I feel this game is more justified as a very positive game or mostly positive, but for such a small team making a game in such a short amount of time from itch.io, they did really good. Now we got Exophobia, which released July 22nd, 2024, and I was immediately intrigued with this game because it looked inspired from a classic shooter game like Wolfenstein and Doom, but with a Metroidvania twist, and I'll say it was a very good experience. You fight your way through a crashed spaceship, fighting aliens and trying to figure out what happened to the human crew. It's quite simple and not a super large game in terms of areas to explore. There's only 4 floors total, but you don't have access to the entire floor until progression and finding the correct elevator, which can lead to the biggest negative I experienced while playing the story, and that was the potential of being incredibly lost. A unique feature is your map dying after having it opened for a certain amount of time, and the only way to charge it is finding a save room. It is a nice feature that I can understand why it's there, but this game doesn't offer any hints or guides on where you're supposed to go next, or if you're even going the right way, so you can find yourself being lost without a map quite often. But you'll find a save room eventually, they're everywhere. That was the biggest negative. You only have 1 weapon, but it upgrades as you progress the game, and the upgrades allow you to open more doors and have more power with an explosive shot, and with that you still get some fun abilities like a teleporter. The combat is like a classic Doom where you can't aim vertically and just horizontally, but more enemies get introduced throughout the game and all become a little bit harder to kill, and the same goes for the bosses. They weren't overly challenging or confusing to figure out the gimmick, but they did test you on whatever new ability you recently received. And the last thing to discuss is the collectibles in the story. The story isn't long and took me about 9 hours to beat, but the game does have a good amount of fun items to collect. You have 3 more secret items with a hidden dog and a gem on each floor. The dogs you can just pet and it has no effect on the game, but the gems allow you to get a good ending of the game with a secret boss fight. But the boss fight was incredibly easy for me, which I guess is fine. And then you have the more common collectibles with travel logs, which gave you lore of the game, and color filters, which completely changed the way the game looks color-wise. You may also have a few extra items like a jetpack that makes you slide crazier or a little drone that follows you until you die. You won't die a lot in the game, but you'd want to make sure you save often because if you do die, you will lose all your progress since your last save, including collectibles. Exophobia was a great time. It has some good replayability with a boss rush mode and an infinite mode, which sadly crashed every time I tried to play it, but that's getting fixed, says the dev. And a solid story with fun combat. Some achievements are not so fun to get in this type of challenge, but that's expected in Metroidvanias. They want you to replay the game, and this is a game that I enjoyed a lot and I feel a lot of people will miss. Next is the game that I thought was going to be the hardest on this list, and it was The Messenger. It was released August 30th, 2018, and let me tell you, oh my god, this game was a ride. The first half of the game you play as a ninja and your job is to go to the mountaintop and deliver a magic scroll to the next messenger. You traverse through multiple worlds in a simple platformer game that can be quite unforgiving. You can buy small upgrades in a shop where the shopkeeper can tell you stories and you can try to open a cabinet. I love the humor that this game offers and doesn't take itself too seriously. It made it more enjoyable for me. The first half of the game though, it's just platforming in different biomes and a handful of fun bosses. Where the game really explodes is after you deliver the scroll to the new messenger, they die almost immediately off screen and now you have the scroll again and the objective changes to finding 6 musical notes to open up a music box artifact. I don't want to spoil the entire story, but with that transition, the game turns more into a Metroidvania where you still have a few upgrades to get, which will eventually allow you to explore new areas with harder platforming, music notes to find, and more incredible bosses. The bosses were one of the best parts of the combat by far. They weren't crazy super hard or super tanky, but the designs of them were top tier and the movesets and openings you had to attack made almost every fight a memorable one. And it's good the bosses were incredible because as much as I loved the simple combat with killing enemies in one hit, It was a little more plain as there was only a handful of different enemies. Some biomes house unique ones, but it wasn't anything too crazy. But everything else about this game, I genuinely loved. The biggest difference with going from a pure platformer to Metroidvania was the ability to time travel between the future and the past, and it made every area so much more unique as you got to see how it looked in both eras. It kept me engaged the entire playthrough. I felt lost a few times, but the game made it super simple to get a hint to get in the right direction if you needed it. And lastly, the collectibles were kind of easy. The only collectible to worry about was green power seals, and the game only had 45 of them scattered across all the biomes, and you only had to do a platforming challenge to get them. I found this game to be near perfect, and I loved it. The game also has a free DLC, which I haven't played as of writing this, but I know I'm gonna love it when I do get to play it. This is another Metroidvania that might be one of my favorite games of all time. Definitely one of my favorite Metroidvanias of all time. The messenger was perfect. Our wheel landed on Alwa's Awakening next, which made me happy because we had 2 Alwa games to play and I didn't want to have to play them back to back. So this gave me a chance to not do that. Alwa's Awakening released February 2nd, 2017, and this is kind of a crazy game. You can play it on an NES if you wanted to, because that's what this game is supposed to replicate, an NES game. You play as Zoe, who's sent to Alwa to bring peace to the land by defeating an evil overlord and their 4 henchmen who are guarding gemstones. Like any Metroidvania game, you have upgrades to unlock that allow you to revisit areas to explore new sections and find more collectibles. That's what most of this game is, collecting and exploring. There is enemies to worry about, but the general combat isn't really memorable. The boss fights can be a little hard as you only get 3 hearts the entire game, but you respawn fast and they also don't have a crazy amount of health or a big moveset. Alwa's Awakening is an interesting game to me. I think it's well made and replicates an NES Metroidvania well. It has challenges, crazy secrets that are hard to find, and it isn't super long. It is more forgiving in some areas compared to an NES, because if you die after collecting an orb or new item, you won't need to recollect it, which is nice. But that made death the more plausible option in a lot of scenarios, because if instead of walking back after collecting an item, you could just kill yourself and respawn at the latest checkpoint because of how slow Alwa was. I collected everything this game had to offer, with 99 orbs, a few secret items, and upgrading your magic items. And sometimes it felt vague on if the game wanted you to sequence break and cheese areas by getting there early, but this game is fun. Some achievements are more annoying for this challenge, like beating the game in 2 hours with 5 or less deaths. But I was able to get a 100% playthrough in 13 hours, and it was a memorable experience. And after Alwa's Awakening, the wheel finally landed on the game most people were super excited for, and it was Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition. What a name. It released August 21st, 2014, and I was excited for this game because it was more my style compared to Alwa with combat. You play as Juan, and your goal is to save your love interest Lupito from an evil charo named Carlos Calaca who kidnaps her. This game has silly humor in it, which enhances it. The combat resembles that of a beat-em-up to an extent, with giant combo meters always tracking how good you do and running into waves of enemies in certain areas. Guacamelee is a rather large game, but also short. You can clear the game in 6 hours or so, but it has a lot to offer with collectibles and side quests. This is one of the games I actually didn't 100%, but still got the best ending possible by collecting 6 orbs scattered in the world. Every area has multiple hidden chests to help improve health, stamina, or your intensometer, which powers you up when activated. And like any good Metroidvania, you need to find tons of abilities to improve Juan before being able to 100% every area. And there are a lot of areas and a lot of secrets that you can easily miss. I really enjoyed the setup of Guacamelee. The main story was always shown for what you needed to do next, so it was impossible to be lost, and you got a lot of upgrades pretty fast, so you could always go back to get some missing items. But I do wish the map was more accessible in some areas. I love that it showed you where an item was if you did see it, but couldn't get it. And it shows the percentage of the area that's complete. Those are things I always like and appreciate, but I wish it would keep track of side quests for you or allow you to pin something just in case. It's not the biggest deal in the world that you can't. The amount of side quests and collectibles are a positive, and the extra content you can do, like the Inferno challenges, always have you doing something in this game. I was able to beat it with a good ending in 11 hours, and overall was impressed with it. At this rate, there's only 2 games left on this wheel, so it was a 50-50 chance, and the wheel landed on Yoku's Island Express next. It released May 29th, 2018, and it probably is the most unique game on this list, as it's a platformer where the main gimmick is focused around pinball. I'll admit, the story isn't anything spectacular. You need to summon 3 chiefs from across Mokumana Island to save Mokuma, who keeps the island together. It's a simple story and allows the game to be beat pretty fast, but the game has a good amount of collectibles and side quests to help keep you engaged. You do find a few upgrades as you progress the story, like the ability to swim underwater and fly around the map off these purple plants. The gimmick of Yokus is fun and unique. You should collect everything, as you can pick up wickerlands to light scarabs, deliver mail and packages since you're a mailman in this game, and open treasure chests for the fruit or a larger fruit wallet. You need to spend fruit to unlock platforms to easily gain access to a lot of areas and some shortcuts. So collect everything. There isn't much combat minus a few boss fights that are just pinball, and I will say that there are a couple small negatives to me with the ease of traveling and the map. The map does show you a good amount, but I found it quite annoying trying to look at where you can go on the map, since you can't place anything and you aren't really allowed to zoom in or out freely. The world isn't crazy large, but I found myself lost a few times, and more importantly, the ease of travel could be annoying. There is a fast travel station with the beeline, but it only gets you so far and can be more annoying to grab onto. Overall though, it's super unique and I did enjoy it. It goes on sale quite a lot, so you can get it for cheap. I was able to beat the game with about 80% completion in about 7 hours, and I'd say you could probably 100% this game and get all the achievements in 10 to 12 hours. Very good time. And finally, the last Metroidvania I played in this little Metroidvania marathon was Alwa's Legacy, the sequel to Alwa's Awakening. It was released June 17th, 2020, and the story is basically the same as the first. Vakar is trying to destroy the world of Alwa, and you play as Zoe. You need to gather 4 gems to defeat him, and your character seems to not remember anything, but the abilities are basically the same. The gimmicks and secrets are similar, but the orbs, the main collectible, serve more of a purpose, as you're allowed to upgrade your main abilities, which allows you to find more secrets. This game seems more inspired by an SNES game compared to the original being NES inspired, and it feels a lot better. Your character is faster, and the game has a lot of quality of life improvements. You can gain more HP by collecting rose petals and turning them in, and you can easily make any save point a fast travel location with green tiers that you find. Other than that, the game feels pretty much the same as the first with the combat and story. I liked it a lot more than the first one, but do think some of the secrets were a lot harder to get to and required a good amount of progression for some of them. I was able to get 70% achievements on the nose and beat the game in 11 hours, which is longer than most, I'd say. But sadly, I did not 100% it. I'll have to get back to this one. And that's 9 random Metroidvania games I beat in 12 days total. It took me 123 hours of streaming, and I'd say 115 hours of that was me playing those Metroidvanias. It's a great genre that never seems to stop producing great games. I have tons more I want to play, but wanted to make a video highlighting my recent ones. If you want to watch my playthrough on any of these Metroidvanias, you can on my Let's Play channel. It'll be in the description or somewhere. It'll be somewhere. But yeah, that's all. Extra special shout out to the people that still support me on Patreon. Still, that extra support means the world, so thank you for that. And lastly, I'll say the best Metroidvania on this list was probably The Messenger. See you next time.